The Mystery of BELICENA VILLCA. Second Book. The Letter of BELICENA VILLCA. 29th Day. To comprehend the reason of the cult of Proserpina in Rusbal, it is necessary to advance a lot in the historical time, and reach an age in which the priest of the cultural had obtained to confuse profoundly in the individual features of Demeter Rema, and Persephone, Freya, to whom they called just the goddess. The objective of the priests was to replace the Hyperborean Atlantean goddess for the image of the Great Mother Bina, one of the aspects Eve, the Creator One. Is here where must be located the myth of Adonis, Greek name of Adonna, the Lord Eve. According to the Greek myth, the mother was Mer, the one that the gods had converted in tree, when she was pregnant of Adonis. Mer, the same which tell that one of the wise men of the East, sent by the wide fraternity, offered to child Jesus. At the 10 months, the tree of the Mer gives birth and Adonis born, a child who represented the beauty, which is not more than a symbolic manner to say that from Tipheth, the beauty in the heart of Eve, one of his 10 aspects, borns the tree of the pomegranate. Continues the myth, stating that Aphrodite, the goddess of fire of love, in other words, the archetype of the warm fire in the heart, falls in love for this child, and she entrusted his care to Persephone Proserpina. We have already presented then, that to the Great Mother Bina, the aspect intelligence of Eve. Both goddess, Aphrodite, and Persephone, end competing to conquer the love of Adonis Adonna, which means that to the animal man or common man, representations of Adam, it is normal to enter in conflict with the warm fire in the heart, Typhod, and the intelligence that Bina infuses in the mind. This ambivalence can be seen in the irresolution of the myth. Adonis Adonna must be pleased to stay alternatively with each one of the goddess, although the preeminence that the priests concede to the heart as seat for the soul, wanted beautiful God to pass a longer time with Aphrodite than with Persephone. The heart is connected to the symbol of the rose, and is in this manner that the death of Adonis, Adonna, brings to the world red roses, born from the blood of her wound. Is Artemis, the bear goddess, who causes that a wild boar hurts mortally the god. The opposition between the wild boar, one of the manifestations of Vishnu, and the bear, is a classic theme in the Hyperborean wisdom. I will only tell that the wild boar is related to the mystery of the Galeen, as was seen in the murder of the Rheas of Tharsis, and that the myth indicates allegorically a great reach by them, a hierarchical level which will allow them to carry out the ensign of Israel, when the own chosen people be unable to do it, when Adonis Adonna be draining blood momentarily in the Pardes Ramonim, to create the roses that will flourish during the universal synarchy. In Phrygia, the Galeen officiated as priests of Cybele, and adopted the practice of the ritual sodomy, vice that still subsists in the high grades of the masonry created by them. The Phrygian myth of Adonis Adonna was the one of Attis, in whose cult the Galeen would develop a fundamental leading role. There the Great Mother Bina was called Cybele, goddess that propitiated scandalous orgies and demanded to her priests of the dog to be eunuchs. In the course of the cult, was common that, taken by the orgiastic frenzy, many participants castrated themselves voluntarily, as the archetype Attis, passing to integrate then, survived from the mutilation, the court of sodomites, that worshipped and served to the goddess. According to the Phrygian legend, Cybele was worshipped as stone of fire. Eager to copulate with her, Zeus Ekma places over the stone his semen, act that impregnates the goddess. And Ecdistis borns, an androgynous being, who had been drunk and castrated by Dionysius Jehovah, with the finality to individualize his sex. From the wound of Ecdistis drains abundant blood, which is transformed in the tree of the pomegranate, reason why Attis, as Adonis, was called Raman, pomegranate. However, the main phallus of Agistis, hurled to the earth, is transformed in the tree of the almond, a member of the family of the roses. A pomegranate, fruit of the pomegranate of Ecdistis, impregnates Nana, daughter of the god sanguinary river. From this pregnancy borns Attis, a beauty god similar to Adonis. and as Adonis, for Attis will also fight with the great mother Bina, and the goddess of the warm fire, in the heart, Typhus. Ecdystis, now converted in woman, falls in love with Attis, as also Cybele, with whom she has to dispute the favors of the beauty god. Evidently, Attis is a Phrygian Adonis, the representative of the beauty of Eve, in the heart, pretended simultaneously by Great Mother Bina Cybele, and by Typhus Ecdystis Aphrodite. But, the Phrygian myth contains more details. Attis, mad for Ecdystis, castrates herself and dies, due to the mutilation, during the cult of Cybele. The goddess buries him, and plants on her tomb an almond tree. Attis was, then, a eunuch and sodomite, signed by the symbols of the pomegranate, and the almond, what clearly proves that the origin of the myth is Hebrew. Remember, Dr. Setonal, on the other hand, that the Jacobins who developed the French Revolution, whose chiefs were Jews and Gaulish, identified themselves with the Phrygian hat, that's to say, the hat of the priests of Phrygia, which has form of crannied foreskin, to indicate the sodomite character of the priests of the Great Mother Cybele Bina, the goddess of reason, of the encyclopedists. Must not surprise at this point, that Dionysius Sabatia was a god of the barley, as Jehovah, who castrated Ecdystis, after he drunk him with wine of barley. Jehovah had sanctified the Saturday, the day that in all the Mediterranean was dedicated to the cult of Saturn and to which was dedicated the pomegranate. Sel, the first king of Israel, consecrated the kingdom, Molkout, the pomegranate, which represented to Eve. Dionysius, the one of the bull's feet and boots, was a hobble god, as the Minotaur, as hobbling, was the dance of the labyrinth, that they practiced, and that they still dance, the male partridges. This dance was performed by the Hebrew priests of Baal Tammuz Adonis in times of Lygia, 9th century before Christ. And the priests took the bullock, which was given to them, and after they prepared it, they called on the name of Baal Tammuz Adonis from morning until noon, saying, "O Baal, hear us." But there was no voice, nor answer. Meanwhile they danced hobbling, next to the altar which they'd made. 1 Kings, 18:26. The Hebrew word Pesach, which designates the Easter, means precisely hobbling dance, because such festivity was the same than the one of Baal Adonis, the god Rimmon, who was killed by a wild boar. This identity is the origin of the prohibition to eat hog meat in the Saturdays. Also, the Levitical tradition decreed that the Easter lamb, the victim of the Holocaust of the Easter, had to be served over a platter of pomegranates wood. The pomegranate was the only fruit that could be introduced in the Sancta Sanctorum, and the supreme priest, to make the annual entrance in the temple, it had sewn on his fed little tassels of pomegranate's form. The roll of the Torah was wrapped up in a stick called escagim, that is to say, the tree of the life, which was topped on each extreme with 2 carved pomegranates. And the Edbul candelabrum, Kenka, possesses a pomegranate crowning each arm, in which a yod shines, the eye of Eve. The Spetubal candelabrum, on its part, Menorah, has 7 shafts of almonds flour, that evokes the institution of the priesthood of Aaron, when the almonds rod flourished, that Moses gave him. And occurred that, on the morrow Moses went into the tabernacle of witness, and the rod of Aaron, of the house of Levi, was budded, and brought forth buds, and bloomed blossoms, and yielded almonds. Numbers 17:8. To perpetuate the remembrance of this miracle, Eve said, "Thou shalt make a candelabrum of pure gold. Of work beaten out with the hammer shall the candelabrum be made. Its shaft, branches, bowls, knops, and flowers shall be of the same. 6 branches also shall come out of the sides of it, 3 branches of the candelabrum in one side, and 3 branches of the candelabrum out of the other side. 3 bowls like unto almonds in one side, 1 knop and 1 flower in one branch, and the same in the other," etc. Exodus 25:31. And, according to the vision of the prophet Jechaiah, these 7 lamps are the eyes of the Eve, which run through the whole earth. Jechaiah 4:10. that is, a representation of the Shekinah. The cults of Baal, the ancient of Baal Tammuz Adonis, practiced by the Hebrew priests, and the one of Baal Moloch, officiated by the Galeen, were interpreted by the Romans as different forms or adoration of Kronos Saturn, a god equivalent to Jehovah Adonai, or Iman Attis Adonis Dionysius. Since the 3rd century before Christ, the priests of the cultural pact, who proliferated in Rome, dedicate Baal to the cult of Proserpina, or Persephone, the infernal lover of Adonis. In the same age, and at a short distance, the lords of Tharsis, consecrated to the cult of Vesta, of Tharsis, and the goddess of the fire of home, behind her, they veiled their conception of the cult of the cold fire. Both opposed cults, the cold fire of Vesta, from Tharsis, and the other of the warm fire of Proserpina, of Pelos, are performed simultaneously, without any of them surpass the other. And it is worthy to repeat that such version of Proserpina was equivalent to a late Persephone, closer to the Great Mother, Cybele, than the old Persephone, or Freya, the wife of Neptune. In the 2nd century after Christ, always furtively, Bray and Bishar reached to Huelva. But this time they didn't attack the house of Tharsis, but they go to Baal, to supervise the cult of Persephone under the command of Melchizedek, a supreme priest of the wide fraternity. After the departure of the immortals, the temple of Comaka at Pelos started to gain fame for the miracles that the goddess realized. The main of them was the cure of the hydrophobia, that all the regions of the peninsula, and even of overseas, came the bitten or infected by the dog's bites, to recover the lost health. Only when they heard to Bray and Bishar against the dog, the illusion of the rage, the 4 priests understood those ancient miracles were related to the powers of Bray and Bishar. 1 century later, in the year 159, the missionary Syriacus converts the cult of Baal in Christian by the simple process of identifying Proserpina with Virgin Mary, called since then Our Lady of the Ribbit, because the goddess continued healing the hydrophobia. But in the time as Mary Mother of God, Proserpina Persephone was already a completed image of the great Hebrew mother Bina. The name Dila Rabida at the Ribbit was, then, 500 years older than the denomination Radha, or Repeta Ribbit, which the Arabs used to signalize the hermitage edified in Baal, over the foundations of the ancient chapel of Our Lady of the Ribbit. Once occurred the reconquest, the hermitage passed, in a beginning, to the hands of the solitary monks of San Francisco, who built the convent with its actual dimensions, but soon was given by the Pope to the Templars, who occupied it until the dissolution of their order. The Bishop Saint Macarius, to celebrate the liberation of the convent, made a donation to the Constantine soldier Daniel, of a sculpture that the tradition attributed to the Apostle Saint Luke and that represented to the Virgin Mary. The moment which I am evoking, when the immortals Bray and Bishar were gathered with the 4 priests in the castle of Arasna, such sculpture was still, in the convent of the Ribbit, in Baal, in front of the Comaka at Pelos.